Welcome to This Explainer. We hear about data breaches and cyber attacks in the news literally all the time, but the actual nitty-gritty mechanics of how attackers break into secure networks, that usually remains totally shrouded in mystery. Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain. We're going to reveal the specific techniques, the tools, and the exact vulnerabilities that hackers are exploiting right now.
So, let's dive right into this core question. What does it actually take to break into a secure network? We're not going to sit here and talk abstract theory today. Instead, we are going to step directly into the shoes of a hacker to see how these highly technical breaches unfold step by step. We'll follow the exact path an attacker takes from that very first moment they target a system all the way to the moment they walk away with the data.
All right, part one, the hacker dictionary. Before we map out the attack itself, let's quickly establish who's who in this world. First up, we've got the good guys, white hat hackers. These are our ethical defenders. They use the exact same highly technical skills as malicious attackers, but they do it for legal, ethical purposes. Their whole goal is to find the vulnerabilities in our networks before anyone else does, so they can actually be patched and secured.
Then, on the total opposite end of the spectrum, we have black hat hackers, sometimes called crackers. These are the folks using illegal tactics for malicious gain. Whether that's financial theft, corporate espionage, or honestly just causing digital destruction. Operating right in that murky middle are the gray hats. The cybersecurity world, it's definitely not always black and white. Gray hats are very often former cybercriminals who have turned a new ethical leaf. They bring their really intimate knowledge of the digital underworld into the light to help defend systems.
And finally, we've got script kiddies. Now, these guys usually lack deep technical knowledge, but surprisingly, they don't really need it. They simply download these incredibly powerful pre-built cyber weapons from the internet, wielding tools they barely even understand to perform criminal attacks. It perfectly proves that you don't need to be some coding genius to cause serious damage. You really just need an internet connection and bad intentions.
Moving on to part two, casing the digital joint. Okay. So, every digital heist starts exactly like a physical one. You gotta scope out the target. Attackers basically have two choices here. First is passive scanning. Think of this like looking at a house on Google Maps. The attacker doesn't connect directly to the target. Instead, they use public info, tools like archive.org, or specialized searches called Google Dorks to find exposed data. It's completely invisible to the target. Then, there's active scanning. This is much more reliable, but it's basically like walking right up to the house and jiggling the door handles to see what's locked. It connects directly to the system, which means, it can absolutely trigger security alarms.
So what does active scanning actually look like in practice? Well, a super common tool for this is Nmap. An attacker basically uses Nmap to systematically knock on thousands of digital doors to map out open ports, like port 22 for SSH or port 80 for HTTP. Finding these open ports is absolutely crucial because they're the potential entryways straight into the network.
But here's the thing, Nmap doesn't just knock one way. It has different techniques. An attacker could use a connect scan, which is super reliable because it makes a full connection, but it's incredibly loud and really easily detected. So sophisticated attackers usually go for the SYN scan. This one is very stealthy. It's a half-open scan that initiates a connection just to gather data, but abruptly resets before the network handshake ever completes. It essentially allows the attacker to map the network like a ghost.
All right, part three, launching the attack.
Recon is done. The attacker found an open door. Now they move to the exploitation phase. It's time to actually break in. And one of the absolute most common and devastating methods for doing this is a web exploit called SQL injection. At its core, this is a code injection technique. It happens when an attacker takes a totally normal web page input field, like a username or a search box, and maliciously drops actual database code right inside it to manipulate or even destroy the back-end system.
Let's break down how this actually works. Imagine a standard login screen. Instead of typing a real username, the attacker types an apostrophe, followed by the phrase, or 1 equals 1. Why? Well, because 1 equals 1 is a logical tautology. It is universally always true. When the website passes this input back to the database, it gets totally confused. That or 1 equals 1 command literally forces the database to evaluate the whole password check as true for every single record. The result? Complete authentication bypass. The database just waves the attacker right on through.
And trust me, it gets worse. SQL injection isn't just for bypassing a login. It can be wildly destructive. An attacker might input a command like drop orders table right into a text field. The semicolon finishes the first legitimate command, and then that drop command tells the database to instantly delete an entire table of data. The double dash at the end? That's a comment character. It elegantly forces the database to just ignore any remaining code, so the malicious command runs perfectly without syntax errors. Without a backup, that data is just gone forever.
Now, while SQL injection goes directly after the backend database, there's another massive threat vector here: cross-site scripting, or XSS for short. Instead of attacking the server, XSS targets the users. An attacker injects malicious client-side scripts, usually JavaScript, into a completely trusted website. When a normal user visits that site, their browser unknowingly executes that malicious script. This allows the attacker to bypass security policies, completely hijack the victim's session, and steal sensitive info straight through the user's own browser.
Okay, part 4. Passwords and payloads.
So the attacker has passed the perimeter, right? They're in. Their next big goal is to lock down that access. To dig deeper into a network, you need passwords. But modern systems don't just leave passwords lying around. Windows passwords, for example, are never stored in plain text. They are mathematically scrambled into a hash and stored in a highly restricted system directory within something called the SAM file. That's the Security Accounts Manager. And while Windows is running, this file is strictly locked down by the OS.
But of course, attackers have a totally clever workaround for this OS lock. They use tools like oafcrack. The process is almost shockingly straightforward. The attacker boots the target computer from a CD or a USB drive running a completely separate Linux environment. Because Windows isn't actually running, those Windows security locks just aren't active. The attacker simply grabs that defenseless SAM file, takes it offline, and uses cracking tools to reverse the hashes right back into plain text passwords.
And when we're talking about dropping payloads, it's actually kind of scary how accessible this stuff has become. Take tools like the Terabit Virus Maker, for example. You literally have point-and-click checkboxes for things like Disable Task Manager, Spread with Folders, or Avoid Opening Notepad. It brilliantly illustrates this terrifying trend of cyber weapons proliferation. You seriously don't need to be a coding genius anymore. Anyone with basic computer literacy can point-and-click their way into generating highly customized damaging malware.
With these tools locked and loaded, the attacker needs to make sure they never get kicked out. They do this by escalating privileges. Imagine an attacker who only has low-level guest access. They can write a super simple 2-line script that tells the computer to add a new account to the powerful domain admins group. They just hide this script right in the computer's startup folder. They don't even have the power to run it themselves, but they patiently wait. The very next time a real administrator logs in, that script executes invisibly in the background under the admin's authority, basically handing the attacker the keys to the entire digital kingdom. Which brings us to part 5, defending the network.
Now that we've seen exactly how the heist goes down, let's flip it. How do organizations build their fortresses? Well, the absolute best way to stop an attack is to blind the attacker during that initial reconnaissance phase. Organizations really have to limit their public digital footprints, meaning strict policies so technical staff don't accidentally leak infrastructure details on public forums. On the tech side, networks must deploy intrusion detection systems to catch those active Nmap scans we talked about and fundamentally block incoming ping requests so the network appears completely invisible from the outside.
When it comes to application defense, especially against those totally destructive SQL injections, the magic phrase is parameterized queries. This is a coding practice that physically separates executable database commands from whatever text the user happens to type into a form. It ensures that even if a malicious user types a command like drop table, the database treats it strictly as harmless text and never as executable code. Pairing this with modern web frameworks that automatically sanitize inputs makes sure those digital doors are firmly locked.
So, we've unpacked the whole process today. We've seen how a simple, logical tautology of 1 = 1, a stealthy network scan, or just a point-and-click malware tool can systematically dismantle an entire network. Knowing exactly how these attackers operate and the sheer accessibility of the tools at their disposal, I want to leave you with this. How robust are the defenses guarding your data right now? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep learning.